Good afternoon. Welcome to the panel on accountability and autonomy of universities and democracies. My name is DIPIKA Jain. I'm a professor of law at Jindal Global Law School. And I have the pleasure of welcoming 4 panelists today to have a discussion with us on this topic. Our first guest with us is Professor HOPPAS, who's the Director of Administration and Finance, Secretary and Registrar, and member of University Board, the Senate, and the Rectorate's Council of Cyprus University of Technology. Welcome. Our second panelist is Professor MARGINSON. He's a professor of higher education at the University of Oxford, director of ESRC, RE Center for Global Higher Education, joint editor-in-chief of higher education, and a professorial associate of the Melbourne Center for Study of Higher Education at the University of Melbourne. Our third panelist is Mr. NIKOLAEV. He's a senior educational specialist at the World Bank Delhi office, joined the bank in 2008. Since then, he worked in different regions and countries, covering mainly higher education and skill projects. Our last panelist is Professor RIORDAN. He's a faculty in German, and he started his career with Swansea University from 1986 to 1998, and then he moved to Newcastle University, where he's a professor of German. As of now, he also became the head of School of Modern Language at Newcastle in 2001. So as we know, university autonomy is essential for safeguarding academic freedom, nurturing intellectual curiosity, and pursuing knowledge without undue external interference. The autonomy is crucial for universities to fulfill their mission of producing high-quality research and education. On the other hand, universities are not isolated entities. They operate within a broader social context and have a responsibility to serve the public good. This necessitates accountability measures to ensure that universities are utilizing their resources effectively, fulfilling their social commitments, and adhering to ethical standards. The challenge lies in striking a balance between the two competing principles, that is, accountability and autonomy. Excessive accountability can stifle academic freedom and hinder innovation, while unchecked autonomy can lead to irresponsible decision-making and a disconnect and societal needs. This tension is evident in the ongoing debate about university funding, research priorities, and institutional governance. We are here today in the afternoon to discuss some of these issues. Some of the main questions that we want to deliberate today on are, number one, how do universities and democracies reconcile their academic pursuit with the diverse expectations of their stakeholders? Number two, how can they strike a balance that ensures accountability without compromising their fundamental autonomy? I'm going to pose a question to all panelists and request the response for the first question, and then I'll move to the second question. Let me start by with the first question, which is that academic freedom is the basis for quality research and autonomy to individual faculty. Yet, modern universities are massive bureaucracies, often leading to centralization of power and funding. How do universities maintain a healthy balance between autonomy of their faculty members and efficiency in decision-making? May I now invite Professor HOPPAS to offer their reflections on the first question.
Good afternoon. Good morning from Cyprus. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this panel session. Hello to the other panelists. I have been member of the faculty at the beginning of my career for about 10 years. And then I moved to administration. And as it was introduced by the facilitator, I'm now the Director of Administration and Finance at Cyprus University of Technology. As most of the universities globally, we do face the same problems as far as academic autonomy or institutional autonomy is concerned, and efficiency of decision-making, accountability to the government and to our stakeholders. I think that the most important thing at the beginning is to try define what academic autonomy is. And if we take it from there, then we can see some actions on how to try and balance the two. Although a lot of publications have been written on these topics, there is not a clear definition of what academic autonomy is all about. So in different countries, in different regions, there are different kind of definitions. So I think we start from there. Academic autonomy, as far as I'm concerned, refers to the ability of the faculty member to decide on all academic issues. At the same time, institutional autonomy refers to the fact that the university government is responsible and autonomous to make the major strategic decisions. However, as a public university, Cyprus University of Technology is one of the 3 public universities in Cyprus. We do have obligation mainly to the government. I have to say that we get more or most of our budget from the government, more than 90%. Therefore, we do have obligation to the government and to the general public. And at the same time, as you mentioned at the beginning, we need to balance the two. My initial statement on this is the following. First of all, faculty members, academicians are responsible, and they do have the right to decide on all academic issues. This refers to the courses that they teach, the material that they teach, their research interests, their research projects. At the same time, this is not isolated within a university. There must be rather rules and regulations that they will govern this. So as my initial statement, I will say that in order to balance these two main constitute of a university, we need to have a good quality academic leadership, a leadership which understands both the need for autonomy to the faculty members, but at the same time, the need to run the university efficiently and effectively, which means what? We need to consider the way we allocate resources, and I mean financial resources, human resources, buildings, equipment, facilities to the faculty member. Another important component is the good university government at the top, whether this is the board or a different and other committee like in the States with the board of trustees and so on. We need to have a proper culture within the university that provides and promotes academic freedom for our faculty, and at the same time consider the legal requirements of the university. And also, I strongly believe that these days, the most important issue in balancing the two is to consider the financial resources. Most of the universities these days, they have difficulties with raising money or getting money from the government everywhere. So this is an issue which has to be discussed. In addition, I will say that if we are able to invest in our faculty members, if we are able to communicate this intention of the university, I think this will help our faculty members to understand also the requirements that we have to the government, to the other stakeholders, to the authorities, to the students, to the parents of the student, and to the society in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Hoppus. We're now going to move to Professor Simon Marginson, and we'd like to have your reflections.
Yeah, thanks, DIPIKA. And it's great to share this panel with colleagues here. I want to take the question back to first principles. The university form is unusual in human societies. It combines high tradition and high modernity, and they're both essential to it. In their core functions, universities have not changed for 3,000 years. In the first academies in China, in the Western Zhao, in 1000 BC or thereabouts, in the Buddhist monasteries, in great Buddhist monasteries in northern India, in Vikramashila and Nalanda, and the others, in the academy at Athens, in the scholarly madrasas, in Islamic mosques in Damascus and Cairo and Cordoba, in the medieval European universities, beginning with Bologna in 1088, and the successor universities in Euro-America and across the world. The core of higher education has always been the cultural formation of persons. The methods of personal formation have also been largely constant through this whole period. The self-forming student is immersed in knowledge, guided by teachers. Everywhere the same techniques have been used for 3,000 years. And knowledge is expressed in text, on paper, and now on screen. Students are organized in classes. There is educational assessment. There is student selection by examination and certification of graduates. Back to the Western Zhao. This intrinsic core of cultural formation has become joined to many extrinsic purposes of higher education, varying over time and place, from the training of state officials in China to religious formation, to scholarship and scholarly expertise offered to the community, to vocational training in a vast range of professions and occupations. Yet all these extrinsic purposes are achieved on the foundations of the same intrinsic cultural core of learning, knowledge, teachers, texts, classes, and exams. And there was only one great change, and that was Humboldt's plan for the University of Berlin in 1810, which added intellectual inquiry and research to the intrinsic core of learning and knowledge. And knowledge moved from received dogma to something that was open to skepticism and always changing. But higher education was still cultural formation. In fact, the Humboldtian reform strengthened learning through immersion in knowledge. In the later 20th century, higher education changed again. And the dominant theme of higher and tertiary education became growth. The gross tertiary enrollment ratio at world level has moved from 16% in 1995 to 42% in 2022, and in India from 5 to 32%. There are now 41 million students in India and 250 million worldwide. Individual universities have grown along with the rest of tertiary education. Clark Kerr called the modern university the multiversity. It is large and always growing larger. Its hallmark is multiplicity. It has multiple disciplines, divisions, agendas, inner constituencies, diverse kinds of student, connections, roles, responsibilities, and an ever-growing list of external stakeholders. Now, at their core, universities are still academic organizations using the same time-honored techniques. But the great growth in size and functions means that a professionalized administration is inevitable. Academic expertise does not lie in governance, budget planning, or external relations. So the key problem in organizing the university is to ensure that its administrative functions facilitate the academic core and its performance academically rather than constraining it. Most universities get this wrong, inhibiting the academic core that is the source of value. I think there are three essentials in trying to get this right. One is separate academic decision-making from administrative and financial conditions, retaining academic control clearly over teaching and research, but not requiring academics to govern the university or run its budget system. Two, establish a climate of high performance so that academic units drive themselves. Three, foster deep decentralization so that academic control of academic matters is a reality. This is how we do it at Oxford. It's not always stable, but if the center of the university overreaches, the decentralized discipline-based units push back successfully. So far, so good. As I said, not always stable. The balances have to be tuned all of the time, but it's possible to achieve optimum performance this way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Marginson. That was really amazing. We're now going to invite Mr. NIKOLAEV for their comments.
Thank you, DIPIKA, and thank you for inviting me to this excellent event. Greetings to my colleagues in the panel. So at the beginning, let me just introduce a few points to create a framework of our discussion. I think it's quite needed. In my view, there is no any oppose between autonomy and accountability. The accountability is a part of any autonomy. Autonomy doesn't mean independence. It's different. These are different things. And being transparent and being accountable, that's an unavoidable part of any autonomy in any area, including higher education. It's also in my view, important to understand that when we are talking about higher education autonomy, we are talking about two layers. It's autonomy of institutions and autonomy of staff and students. And if even in many areas these layers work together, still these are about two different things. And also it's important to understand that autonomy can be academic, can be organizational, can be financial. There is HR autonomy, it's administrative autonomy, etc., etc. So there are many, many different areas within these two layers of higher education autonomy about which we can talk a lot. Here, according to your question, we are talking mainly about the second layer, which is an autonomy of faculty members and students within the institutions. And I should say from the beginning, but that in my view, in a view of outsider, I'm not working at the university, so autonomy of the faculty members is extremely important. It empowers them to explore unconventional ideas, to challenge existing paradigms, to push the boundaries of the knowledge. It also allows students to create own personalized learning programs with specific sets of skills and knowledge to have at the end of the training. It supports the environment within the university that fosters soft skills development, very important in our days, such as critical thinking and creativity. And with all this said, answering directly to your question, I think the main answer, at least from my perspective, is that there should be clear rules of the game within the institution regarding autonomy of the faculty and regarding autonomy of the students. And this should include like institutional regulatory framework that will be formal, will be transparent, and will be quite simple to be understood by anyone. And that will create very concrete processes within university that will allow students and faculty to understand own autonomy, but also to use it. I would agree with colleagues that said that before me, that in many countries and in many institutions, universities are still led by academicians. In few cases, like for example, in India, it might be also politicians, but still not professional managers. And that's a clear problem of our sector, at least as I see it. Because what is the main approach academicians use? It's an experiment. We follow up research discussion. We don't use the managerial approach of setting up regulations and processes. It's just a different approach of work. And this at some point needs to be changed and needs to be implemented at university because this is a way out of the managerial control and bigger efficiency through the faculty autonomy. Just as a last point, I would say that it is very clear why, for example, National Education Policy 2020 here in India says a lot about autonomy of universities and faculty staff. For example, you can find the word autonomy 34 times in the 60-page document that talks about all the education system and set the strategy for the education system development. I think it's a clear sign of the importance of the topic of autonomy for many countries, including India. From other hand, again, coming back to India, we will not find many reflections related to autonomy in Indian legislation. At national level, I don't know any document that says about autonomy, and I've did a quick search and found only one state level document, which is Karnataka State Universities Act, that back in 2000 clearly defined autonomy of universities as one of the main areas of the importance. This is the area where we should go forward and work more, I think. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. NIKOLAEV. We're now going to move to Professor Colin Riordan for their comments.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. I will probably find myself repeating what other participants have said if I go through all the thoughts that I had on this, but I'll just make 3 points and then draw a brief conclusion. I think the first thing is something that others have alluded to, which is there is a significant difference between university autonomy, the institutional autonomy, and academic freedom of individual academics. It's important that institutions, university institutions, are able to direct their own affairs, free particularly of political interference, but also of excessive regulation, because in the end, that's how you get the best results. And Simon could doubtless explain exactly why that is. The perspective I'm speaking from is of a former vice-chancellor. I was vice-chancellor of 2 different universities in the UK for a total of 16 years, and you get the best results if universities are allowed to push themselves. Now, at the same time, you get the best results if academics are able to direct their own academic affairs as well. So how do you get the balance with all of this? Well, the problem is there are limits, of course, to autonomy of any university. You're funded by somebody. They have a right to expect that something comes back in return for that funding. It may not be anything specific, but they want generally to see prosperity, employment, happy graduates who are useful to society, that sort of thing. And the graduates themselves, of course, have their own personal needs and ambitions. So you do have responsibilities of funders. There are regulations. There have to be regulations. You know, any kind of system requires that. So you've got to comply with those. There is democratic accountability we're talking about universities in democracies here. Taxpayers are funding a lot of this, and the students and the staff have various expectations. And there are many others. You have an obligation to your own region where you are as a university. So there are limits to your autonomy. You cannot ignore all these things. And the same with academic freedom. Academics must be free to, must have freedom of inquiry, but they are actually in an employment relationship as well. You know, they get money in the bank account every month for doing a job. And therefore it is important that in return for that, there is some account taken of the strategy and general requirements of the institution. And there are things like student demand. There are professional bodies that insist that certain things need to be taught in certain ways, or that curriculum needs to look, it needs to have certain features to it. Now, in terms of accountability then, that's what the limits are. Autonomy is a desirable position. We've got to find a balance between the two somehow. That's what we've been talking about. How do you do that? Well, there isn't a formula for it, in my experience. It does require judgment and a degree of flexibility. It does require experience over time. And it's a bit like the sort of political idea of checks and balances. You mustn't let any one of these things get too far out of kilter. And when it does, you have big problems within the university. And Simon actually referred to that, where you get these occasions where the academics want one thing, the university or the government wants another, and we get a row about, all the students, and we get a row about it. And that happens regularly at universities. It's not very nice when it's happening to you personally, but it is nevertheless a positive thing that ought to happen, because that is how the system should work. If there's never any serious disagreement, then you've got a problem. So essentially, we are talking about culture here. You need to have the right culture. I spent the last 11 years as a Vice-Chancellor of the Cardiff University in Wales, where we were very fortunate that government, regulators and universities, and indeed students, did tend to work well together, and we were able to have a good balance in that respect. So that's all the comments that I had at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Riordan. There are several things that have come to the table today as a response to the first question. I think it's a unanimous belief that academic freedom is at the heart of a university, and there is a fundamental difference between accountability and independence. And the last thing, which was really important, is the question of leadership and culture. That's really something that sets the stage for academic freedom in a university, which is central to the imagination of an academic institution. With that, we will move to the second question now. My sense is that we have very little time for very quick, brief reflection. And this is coming from this understanding that all of you put on the table already, which is the difference between autonomy and independence. So in balancing autonomy and accountability, universities often face external pressures for various reasons. How does your institution navigate demands from various stakeholders, including government bodies, donors, public, while preserving academic independence necessary for unbiased knowledge creation and dissemination? So maybe I'll go in the same order that we went the first time, and invite Professor HOPPAS for their comments.
I think all the issues mentioned by the other presenters before can help to answer the second question as it was raised. So in addition to balancing the two, autonomy and accountability, and within the same line of work, I think that universities need to create a good relationship and a good internal culture that will help provide the right feedback and the right relationship with the main stakeholders. So if we talk about the government as one of the main stakeholders, not only because they finance public universities, but also because they created universities, as it was said by Professor Marginson before, as a mean to provide to the society, to develop a person, to create prosperity, growth, as was discussed by Professor Wilhelm, graduation of students. I think the most important thing is to cooperate, I will say in quotation, obey rules and regulation with regards to legal obligation of the university. And of course, to try persuade governments to provide the necessary funds for universities to run. Another body, another part of the stakeholders, I will say, are the research funders. As far as we are concerned here at Cyprus, most of the research funding to our faculty comes from the European Union through the European programs. So therefore, we have to follow the rules and regulations. Anyway, they are strict rules and regulations, and there are competitive proposals in order to gain this money to the university. So another thing is to be able to follow their rules and regulations. And another major group is our students. I think that the reason why universities exist are students. Therefore, we do have the obligation to make sure that students get the appropriate knowledge and skills so that they are able to go out in the market. At the same time, we need to provide to our students a welfare and a very, I will say, good student life during the years at the university. 2-3 other things that are important is to make sure that internally universities, committees, and bodies must include both internal and external members. This is one way to have external stakeholders involved. And I will say, if external stakeholders are involved and participate in university decision making, this will be a kind of cooperation between the university and the stakeholders. It is important as a university to take necessary measures to exclude any conflict of interest between different parties within the university or with people outside the university. As I mentioned before, implementing policies and rules and regulations that have a clear framework, it's important. The development of mechanism for check and balances, accountability actually with the government, with the external funders will be important. And of course, these days, universities are imposed with very high expectations from the general public. So each university needs to take this into consideration and create these measures so to fulfill this expectation. At the end of the day, universities live and survive due to the funding that is granted to them by the governments and, of course, by the general public. So we do have another responsibility to make sure that this money, every euro, every dollar, every whatever, it's used and utilized in such a right way to take to produce actions and to produce proper outcomes. My closing statement as far as this relationship between the stakeholders and the university is that, from my experience, every time we have them on board, every time we have them with them, whatever the topic is, whether it's the change in the law whether it's to develop a new program. This helps the relationship between the university and its stakeholders, and the results are always positive. So this is how I close. I think the best way to navigate the demands with various stakeholders is to have them involved, to have them informed, to have them participate with us in making the most important decisions and in producing certain projects. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Hoppas. Now I'm going to invite Professor Marginson for their comment.
Thanks, DIPIKA. I want to endorse Colin's point about the role of expert judgment in managing the balances, the relationships. I mean, I think judgment is the essence of leadership, judgment, not metrics. Now, let me make a further kind of fundamental point. The university has a double location. I mean, it's locally and nationally nested, but it's also engaged in universal mentality and in universal forms of knowledge and in the mobility of ideas and person beyond the national border. So as well as being locally and nationally located, it's also located in this larger episteme and human networks beyond the nation. The visiting scholar, the visiting student, this is normal to university life and has been since very early, back to the Buddhist monasteries in northern India, at least in the conduct of higher education. And both this local nesting and the larger networks are essential to the teaching and research core. Now, this arrangement, this double location, is always unstable, and the relationship between the two kinds of location has to be constantly monitored. And there are always problems somewhere in the universities in this regard. And the main problem, arguably, is not ivory tower university independence. It might have been before the high modern period, but the main problem now is state overreach. For example, at present, the intervention of the Hungarian government to prohibit gender studies in Hungary, interfering with the curriculum. The intervention and securitization of research collaborations involving the US and China and the Western countries and China at present. The intervention in an increasing number of countries in legitimate international student mobility. And I think the larger perhaps problem that's been with us for longer of too much top-down determination, too much external determination of research priorities from government agencies. I mean, I think it's inevitable there will be some external determination of research priorities. The funders are external and they must have some scope to direct activity, but there must also be considerable scope for bottom-up determination of research priorities, not replacing academic determination with external determination. It's really important to maintain both elements. Again, the double location, the double spatiality in research priorities and their determination. So a large part of research activity needs to come from the decentralized academic units themselves. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Professor Marginson. I'm going to now invite Mr. NIKOLAEV for their comment.
Thank you. I will try to be very quick here. So in my view, it is very important when you receive any kind of demand or request to differentiate if it is the demand from the stakeholders or is it a pressure for control, because these two are very different things. In my view, stakeholders, they are really those who can ask for something and demand something from the university. But when it leads to full control under any kind of areas, for example, under research, it's already not a good thing. It should be pushed back. How to solve this? Again, in my view, the solution is in clear procedures and clear formalized processes being in place. So if the agreement between the government and between country and the university says that there is not more than 50% of topics to be agreed and to be followed by the request, it already creates a kind of boundaries. Without this, if everything is based on negotiations or historical traditions, we can come to the situation when everything, starting from the access rules, moving to the research outcomes, will be biased by someone. And university will lose all the autonomy and will be not autonomous, but under the control of, it doesn't matter, government or donors or specific political group, etc. Yes, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. NIKOLAEV. Our last comment is going to be from Professor Riordan on the last question.
Yes, thanks very much. And in answering the question, how does your institute navigate demands from various stakeholders? I found that the answer to that was with increasing difficulty. It got more and more difficult over the 15 or 16 years, in fact, that I was a vice chancellor to balance this. And the pressures became different and more insidious and more subtle. So the UK universities are heavily dependent, or almost entirely dependent really, on international student recruitment for their financial health, which means that you've got to be very careful in terms of research not to cause too much offence to some of the countries from where the students are being recruited. And, you know, that does create a form of insidious pressure, which is difficult to navigate. The other point I would raise is one that Simon alluded to in terms of Hungary, that the culture wars, and we saw recently the presidents of two of the most famous universities in the world resigning in the face of enormous pressure that was being exerted on them in ways that didn't really used to happen in quite that fashion, in my view. And they found themselves caught up really in the very heavily polarized set of political circumstances to which there is no actual resolution. So I think I return to my previous point that there is not a solution or a formula for this. You do have to operate far more like a politician, perhaps in a leading position, that has to balance different factions, different pressures, financial resources, and so on and so forth. And it does create some difficulty. Nevertheless, having said that, I absolutely believe in the obligation and duty of any university leader, any university president, or indeed leader of a research group or anything else, to ensure that as far as is reasonably possible within the circumstances, that we do defend academic freedom, freedom of inquiry, academic integrity. And it's our job to find the resources to support that, but sometimes to make key decisions about where those resources need to be directed. And that's just, you're not going to please all of the people all the time, is frankly it. So you have to be able to put up with the consequences of that.
Thank you so much, Professor Riordan. So there have been a lot of important and interesting and very nuanced sort of perspectives on the table. We have a few questions and we only have 10 minutes. So my sense is that I will take one question and have you respond. Anyone from the panel can respond. And if you have more time, I'll take the second question as well. The first one is, and I'll read, is there a magic formula for balancing accountability and autonomy, or is it always a work in progress? So we can have all of you respond, or we can have any one of you respond.
Well, I'll come back in and say there is no magic formula, actually. I think Professor HOPPAS made a very good point about involving people in decisions. The more secretive you are, the more it's a black box and nobody really knows what's going on, the more difficult it is. It's like the traditional thing of it's the cover-up causing the problem. Even if there's not a cover-up, if you don't communicate and you try and fix things behind the scenes, it really doesn't work in this day and age. I don't think it ever did. So promoting as much within things like commercial confidence, open debate, involving people, co-creating as much as you can is unquestionably helpful, in my view.
Yes. And would anybody else like to respond? Professor Marginson, Professor
Mhm.
Hoppa or Mr. NIKOLAEV?
Well, yeah, very quickly. I mean, in addition to what Colin has already said, I mean, important to keep in mind that the complex resolution of complex problems has a temporal dimension, in the sense that you can solve a problem today, but you may create a larger problem for tomorrow. So you need to be, like a chess player, several moves ahead in the game, and think about the downstream consequences of the, of the particular situation that you're in, that you need to resolve, and the solutions you come up with.
Thank you so much. Professor HOPPAS, your comments.
I agree that there is not a magic formula in dealing with this balance. I think all the panelists propose some action that will help towards creating such a balance. From my experience as a practitioner the last 15 and more years, is that the kind of good relationships internally within the university and externally with the major external players, whether it's government or other institution, can help every organization. We need to maneuvering in such a way to deal with day-to-day problems that universities are facing. In addition, I invest a lot in creating or changing the culture of the university internally. So you need to pass all these messages and have everybody involved, informed and involved in decision making. And of course, it depends of the people that there are at the top of the organization. I'm very concerned with the characteristics, qualities of the management team, and I'm referring to both academic leadership and administrative leadership. So if these two groups have the right person, the right qualities, the right competencies, and if they have the same goals, this is important. If the goals of most of the internal stakeholders are in line, this helps organization to go on, to grow, by still having this good balance between autonomy and accountability. Both of them are needed. Both of them are core for every university. So it's the responsibility of the leadership of the university, is the responsibility of the academic leadership and administration leadership to try put this together. Again, there is not a magic formula, but there are action, there are initiatives that can help to maintain a good relationship between the faculty members, the administration, and the university as a whole.
Thank you so much. Mr. NIKOLAEV, would you like to have the last word?
Yes, maybe just quickly. There is definitely no magic formula, but possible first step, I think, is pretty clear, is to make any decision-making processes transparent. And transparency is a core. And I think it might even guide you to find the right balance between autonomy and accountability. So I still don't think that it's different things. It's just a part of the same. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this very, very engaging conversation on accountability versus independence, and some of the nuances that came up. I'm sure it was a very helpful conversation for everyone who joined us today to think through the issue of accountability and academic freedom. Have a good day, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.